So welcome everybody. People are entering the room. This is good. Just to let you know, we do have a chat room going. While we're waiting for everyone just to come on board, if you want to go in the chat room and just say where you're from. Let's see who's the furthest afield tonight. Dublin, is that Al? Yes.
Joran from the Netherlands.
Oh, great.
Goedenavond, Joran. Edinburgh, Mulgai. New Zealand, but he's living in London. And the other thing, Adrian, maybe is just to remind people to put their microphones off if they're not speaking. It just helps us with the feedback.
Fabulous. Okay, we're getting close to, well, the room is filling up. Welcome to the party, everybody. Dunblane getting a mention, and Edinburgh, very good.
And my Costa del Kilmarnock, yeah. And Denmark.
Denmark, yeah.
Well, as you know, all roads will lead to Mulgai in about 11 to 12 days' time. Yeah. Okay, we'll just give it another couple of minutes as we welcome more people. But if you're just joining, we've been asking people to put where they're from in the chat box. So
Yeah.
a flavor.
Tom from Belgium.
Oh, getting very cosmopolitan now. Might be time to mention, did you speak to AJP, Ian? The chap at I Run Far.
Yes, it is. Yeah, and the article came out, I think, as well.
Yeah, we're on Iron Far at the moment.
Okay, so I'll give that a first mention while we're just waiting another couple of minutes. That I Run Far, as some of you may know, is an American website, well known to most ultra runners. They've been doing a little series. AJP, one of their journalists, been doing a series of under the radar races. You don't have to go to the big sort of cosmopolitan races and join in big circuses. There are lots of races happening in your own locality, wherever you are, that are worth supporting. And he's done 7 in America. He's done 1 in Europe up to now, but he got in touch with us because he'd heard great things about the West Highland Way. So we're delighted he's done an article about it. So do go on to the irunfar.com website and check out his article on the West Highland Way. Okay, so we've got a healthy little following now.
Yeah.
So I think we'll kick off. Okay. Welcome everybody to our final webinar of the spring. Just a couple of housekeeping notes before we start. We'll just introduce everybody. Those that don't know me, I'm Adrian. I help Ian in the background with the race, some of the few other races throughout the year. We've got John and Helen. John, our tech guy, he's making sure everything is running smoothly. And Helen with their very professional backdrops, putting my little finishers banner to shame there. And they'll be curating the chat room as well. Ian's hovering in the background in case anyone needs to know anything. But we also have 2 special guests tonight. We've got Richard from Ultra. Hi, Richard. He's going to have a little chat about Ultra shoes later on. And his backdrop you might recognize. If you just move slightly to one side, Richard, they can see that is the Balmaha training weekend. The Ultra have set up. So thank you for that, Richard. Very professional backdrop to inspire us all. And we also have West Highland Way legend, known to many of us, Paul Giblin. Hi, Paul.
Hello, everyone. Nice to be here.
So we're going to start the evening with chatting to Paul in a minute, and then we'll have a little chat to Richard sort of mid-race. And then to end the race or the evening, we'll have another chat to Paul about how to final preparations before we open it up to a question and answer to everybody. You've all got online. If you happen to lose your connection, we all know how Zoom works these days. Give it a couple of minutes. If it doesn't connect back, just log out and log back in again. The meeting is being recorded, so you will be able to play catch up. You will not miss any vital information. And we do have the chat room open, as most of you are aware. Lots of messages coming in from where you all are. And Helen and John will be looking at the chat throughout, and we'll flag up any questions as we go along as necessary. Okay, and I should ask, I've been told to say, if you have your microphones on silent, if you're not, that it just stops the feedback with the general proceedings. Okay, so without further ado, we'll start our little chat with Paul. Hi, Paul. So just tell everyone where you are just now.
I'm back in Scotland.
Very
I
good.
am not in the Central Belt. I'm up in Inverness now, so I'll be based in Inverness kind of long term now. I'm back from New Zealand. I was about 15 months in New Zealand, so glad to get back to Scotland, if I'm honest, to a nice summertime. A couple of weeks ago it was sunny anyway. It's not so sunny now, but yeah, I'm glad to be back. It's nice.
Very good. It's good to see you. We'll maybe touch on your New Zealand adventures a little later on, but West Highland Way. I mean, you first came on my radar around about 2011, I think. Yeah, when you started doing some interesting things like running the D33, then the Fling, then the Catherine, all in the space of 3 months. And then you did West Highland Way in June that year and ran 19 hours, 7 minutes, 26.
I've forgotten the time, to be honest.
Okay, I did my homework this morning, Paul. So
I can tell.
And tell us about that first one. I mean, what first inspired you to do the West Highland Way? I think how you got into running is fairly well documented on the pylonultra.com website if you look up the back articles. But how did you first get inspired to run the West Highland Way?
I don't remember exactly the first time I heard that people ran these huge distances on trails, but I remember the first time I heard it and I found it online. I was just astonished. I just felt really, really drawn to it. And then I heard about the Highland Fling, and then I heard about the West Highland Way Race, and from that first moment of hearing about the West Highland Way Race, I knew I had to do it at some point. It was a trail that was on my doorstep. There was some connections from a family perspective. My mum used to run with Jan and Bobby Shields, and Bobby was obviously involved in the first race and everything. So I don't know, I just felt like this immediate emotional connection to the race. And then I'm a bit of a geek. I was a geek when I first started ultra running. I just wanted to read as much as I could about different races and different ways to train. And there was lots of history attached to the West Highland Way Race. So I got very excited about it. It wasn't the right way to go about ultra running, I don't think. Like you said, in the first year, I think I did 7 races in 1 year, having not run more than a marathon, which is not, I would never recommend it to any athlete, but I had this opportunity to join the West Highland Way Race, and I would have probably been better to do it the year after, but I had this opportunity to get my spot, and yeah, I was very nervous but very excited about doing it.
You mentioned the nervousness there. There's a lot of first timers on the call tonight, I'm sure. A lot of people talk about first time nerves. When you were standing at the start line in Mulgai, were you excited, nervous, a bit of everything? Were you just thinking, oh, this is too much, I want to go home? Or were you really up for next stop, Fort William?
I was really up for next stop, Fort William. I was thinking, I can do anything. I've run 50 miles. This is going to be easy. You know, it's just a longer day out. Like I just had this energy, I think, at the time. I was excited about it, but like after that, I felt super nervous about other races that have been easier than the West Highland Way Race, and that's from experience because I know what can go wrong. But in that moment, I just wanted to be out there, and I thought it was incredible that I'd have this chance to be out there all day, heading north and heading towards this one direction, this big goal of Fort William, which is quite a nice part of the race, I think.
Yeah, and as we all know, the West Highland Way is special to a lot of us. It's just it's a great way of seeing Scotland in midsummer. For those of you who haven't stepped foot on the route at all yet, who are coming from further afield, you'll see Scotland in its many sort of forms, from lowlands right through to the majestic highlands. So it's great. And you've run the race several times now. You've trained on the race a lot. Can you put into words how, as you progress along the route, you just sort of go from the sort of pleasant lowlands into towards the gentle highlands, and then you get into the highlands proper when you get to Glencoe, let me say.
Yeah, I mean, the way it always panned out with me, it made a lot of sense from when you started in the dark, and it's quite exciting when you start in the dark, and People will either love or hate the 1 a.m. start, but it's quite unique to the race in a lot of ways. So it's quite exciting running through the dark and running through Mugdock Park and getting out towards Connick Hill and everything. And then I was lucky enough, the sun was coming up when I'm across the lochside, and then it starts to open up, like you say, once you get past Crean Larrock and up towards Tyndrum. You've got a very different landscape to look at. Rannoch Moor is fairly bleak, but it's incredible to be running across that trail in this massive expanse. And I think it's quite important that people try and take note of that sometimes. It's quite easy to be caught up in the running and focused on the next aid station or checkpoint and maybe thinking about the pain in your feet and all those things. But sometimes you can look up and remember where you are and what you're doing, and it gives you a little bit of energy. I actually feel quite jealous sometimes of people doing their first ever 100-mile race or their first ever West Highland Way, because like you don't get to do that again. Once you've tried it once and once you've done it once, you don't have that big unknown, which is quite a unique place to be. And that first one I did, like I had no idea what I was doing really. I didn't know how I was going to feel after 60 miles, 70 miles, 80 miles, and I made some mistakes. I made lots of mistakes, but it was a really special one, and it's one that's going to stay with you for a long time. Your first one, I think.
Always does, yeah. As you say, it didn't put you off. You obviously made a few mistakes, as everyone acknowledges, after their first one, but you came back the next year and improved by 2 hours.
Yeah.
Finished in second place, and Terry Conway was ahead of you, broke the record.
He did.
Two things from that. How do you improve by 2 hours? For those who are doing the race for the second time, the hard work's been done, but just briefly say how you improved over that 12 months. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's going to be a lot to do with your training, and I don't want to put anybody off who's maybe feeling like they haven't trained to their absolute capacity, but you go in and you have a bit more experience, so you know what sections, maybe the sections that you might have struggled in the past. I had a big issue in that after 70 or whatever it was, 60 to 100 miles. I hadn't run that far before, so I didn't know how my body was going to react. I didn't know how I'd be able to face it mentally. I took a wrong turn going into Kinlochleven. I had some hallucinations. I thought I could see cars parked, and I crossed rivers and all those kind of things, which when I look back at it now, and I've run past that now at least 20 times. I mean, I was 100 meters from the next post that would have just guided me down there, and I wouldn't have lost at least an hour and a half. So yeah, I felt very passionate about the race, and I went back and I knew what training I had to do. So on the second race, when I was racing with Terry Conway, Terry was somebody I knew about already. Terry had an incredible year that year. I think he went on to win Lakeland in the same year, didn't he? And it was just, I felt kind of privileged to have run that race with him and come in second. But it was at the end of that race, that was when I really made the decision that I'm going to win this race. I'm going to break a record on this race. And it's stuff I'll talk about later, really, but it's maybe accepting that you're an athlete, and anybody can do that. You don't have to be racing near the front. If you accept and consider yourself an athlete, whether you're going to finish in 30 hours or you're going to finish in 14 hours, you start to make really clever athletic decisions in your life, and it turns things around quite a lot. So things like my recovery was better, the food that I was eating was better, the training I was doing was better quality training, and those things can be quite important. And it's such a simple thing, which I'll maybe talk about later.
Thanks. Fast forward another year, 2013, and you're setting the record yourself, 15
Yep.
hours. How did it feel? Or put it this way, whereabouts in the West Highland Way did you realize, wow, I'm on for the record here?
I set out to break the record on that one, and I actually felt confident I could do it. And I'm not this super confident, arrogant athlete at all, and I never really have been. But when I look back at that, I set out to break the record on that. I knew there were some good people in the race on that particular year. There's always good people in the race, but I knew who my competition were. And I knew that everybody would think I'd gone out too hard in that race, and I knew people would let me go, and that was it. So I just had this plan in my mind that I'm going to go out, I'm going to create a gap, and I'm just going to keep pushing and keep pushing. And I went out, and it kind of worked out well. There were some dark spots. There's dark spots in any race, obviously, and you have some doubts. And it's quite hard. leading a race because it's yours to lose then, and people are chasing you. And actually, sometimes it's easier to be chasing somebody else, which happened in subsequent races. But I had a real confidence and desire to do well in that race and try and break the record. And there's no guarantees, obviously. There never is, even when you get to maybe the final climb and you're heading down towards Fort William. There's still no guarantees at that point. But yeah, I felt strong, and then I got some good feedback from my crew at that point that things were looking good, and I just needed to stay on course. And yeah, it's pretty special now that I think about it. I don't think about it very often, but yeah, it's nice to be reminded.
One question comes to mind. You mentioned just being out of the front of the race, just on your own for several hours, basically.
Yeah.
Most of us who've done the race, most of us doing most races, you've usually got some interaction with other runners, be it at a checkpoint or you're catching someone up or someone's catching you up. How do you deal with just being on your own for sort of maybe 10 hours at a time?
Yeah, it's quite difficult. The third win, I remember, I think I was out quite a distance on my own for quite a long time, and I felt a bit of pressure because I'd won the previous 2 years, I'd broken the record the previous 2 years. So the third one, I was probably thinking maybe this will be my last one and I'll take a break from the race or whatever. And then you're out there and you know, I can't remember, maybe it was an hour and a half ahead at some point or something. It's quite difficult to keep yourself pushing forward. And then I remember, I think I saw you, Adrian, up at Glencoe at the ski centre or something, and I think it was probably a wee bit down on time then. So
My
yeah, I
recollection,
don't know.
2 or 3 minutes down on the schedule. Yeah, but
Yeah.
remember
So
you
I'm
coming.
kind of thinking, yeah, maybe it's gone, and then maybe I won't feel the same way if I'm not able to break a record, and there's expectations on me. So it was actually quite tough, and I made a decision when I got down to the road crossing there at Glencoe, like, right, I need to give this a really good go to Kinlochleven. And if the record's gone then, the record's gone then, you know, I'll run it in kind of thing. But I pushed hard up the Devil's Staircase and down to Kinlochleven and felt I still had a chance coming out of there. So yeah, it was a difficult one.
For the record, that third run was 14 hours, 14 minutes and 44 seconds. And you finished 2 hours ahead of Neil McNichol, who is no mean runner, as we most
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
We thought that record would last for years, unless you came back again for year number 4. And that might be an option still, who knows? But why for a couple of years when Rob did his amazing 13:41? Do you think 13:41 can be beaten by somebody?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah. 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 I think the course has got slightly quicker. I think people generally are training better and better prepared, and for these races, there's better access to information and nutrition plans, and all those things have improved. So I think it probably is. Yeah, it's more than possible to go quicker than that. Yeah.
And throughout the route, do you have a favorite bit of the route where you either it's got pleasant memories for you, or is there a part of the route where you know you can put the hammer down? Like this section I know is very runnable. I can make up a bit of time here.
Yeah, I think it's easy to be put off by the conversations you'll see quite a lot on the race, right? So people will talk about a technical section on the lock side or something, and that's really slow, and you're going to have a tough time there. It's going to be really difficult to get to Binglass. And I was aware of that quite early on, and I went back to those sections and I ran those sections particularly hard in training and stuff as well. But it became an opportunity for me to really make up time on those sections, because I wouldn't allow those conversations to put me off. Because when you start hearing that a lot from people, the technical section is going to take you loads of time. You start to limit yourself almost. So I enjoyed those harder sections, like, because I felt like it was an opportunity to really put some time in people. And if everybody felt the same way and everybody was thinking this is a slow section, then it's an opportunity to magnify your speed advantage, if you like. So things like those sections, I would suggest to people, don't be put off by them. It's just find a good running rhythm, and you're moving well, then you can get through those sections relatively scot-free without too much harm to your body and too much harm to the time overall. If you just stay relaxed and don't get too worried about any particular section. I'm not saying take things lightly and just expect everything to be golden. It's not, but like, don't talk yourself out of Conic Hill before you've even got up and over Conic Hill, for example, and don't tell yourself that the Devil's Staircase is going to be the worst climb you've ever done in your life. And I know it's far into the race, and I know it is difficult, but it's shorter than you realise if you're positive in your mind.
Good answer. Yes. Yeah. Talking too much about difficult sections can become a self-fulfilling prophecy, I think is what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. You say it much better, Adrian.
It's okay. So obviously the West Highland Way and running in Scotland means a lot to you, but you've also traveled abroad to several races, Western States being one of them. Yeah. And just briefly, obviously we value the sort of the family feeling, the community we built up around our race, obviously the West Highland Way over the years. When you go to somewhere like the Western States, or even, dare I say, the Chamonix party, how does those sort of races compare with something like we've got going here in Scotland? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's two sides to it for me, really. Obviously, I'd done 5 West Highland Ways in a row. I couldn't then do a West Highland Way in Western States. I wanted to test myself on another race, and another 100-miler like Western States, and that's a race that is similar in many ways, I think, to the West Highland Way race, and it's got that history that really gets me excited about races. So it was something I was really keen to do, and it was a difficult race to get into, and all those things as well. I think those two races are actually quite similar. Western States is a higher profile, obviously, I think, just because more higher profile athletes go. But I think it's easy for people to get carried away, right? Like, you speak to any ultra runner, they all want to do UTMB, they all want to do Western States, they all want to do 3 or 4 big races, right? Which is fine. Like, I can't say it was any different. I wanted to do those races too. But having done lots of those races, and having done the races I've done in the UK and Scotland, there's something very special about smaller races where you actually have a connection to the people that are sitting on this call, and the people that are going to be at that checkpoint, and the people that were at the checkpoint 4 years ago when I was there, and the people that weren't at the checkpoint at Benglass when I came through that one year and I had to fill up my own bottle. I'm only joking. So yeah, like, I would suggest to people, don't get too carried away and too obsessed by doing these big Ironman UTMB races. They're a spectacle, and maybe once in your life you want to go and take part in a big spectacle. But I personally get more out of races where I feel a connection to the people that are doing them, and the people that organise them, and the people that turn up year on year to support the races. So yeah.
That's good. Yeah. I think we all realize the UTMB races have their place. Don't get me wrong, I'm not against them either.
Yeah.
They have their place, but it's like having your expectations when you go to these races that it's going to be different. And for
Yeah,
those,
it's very different.
yeah, what Paul was referring to there, one year when he was on record pace, we weren't expecting him to be going so fast. So he actually beat the people who were supposed to be at the Beinglass checkpoint. He got to Beinglass before the checkpoint was set up, and just had to help himself to some water and carry on. Yeah. We've learned,
panic.
as organizers, we've learned from that as well. So we always get to that checkpoint well ahead of time now. So as part of your running journey, as well as all the established races you've done, you've also done several little personal journeys. 2 that come to mind are your Cape Ross trundle, which I think you did with Graham, was it? Graham Connolly, your good friend?
Yeah.
Which is just it's a smidgen at 370 kilometers in some ways, although it's very difficult terrain. Those who know that the wonderful other universe that is Sutherland know the tracks don't exist there. You've got to find your way most of the time.
Yeah.
Last year, you then did I don't know how to pronounce it, Te Arara Trail in New Zealand, which is whole north to south of New Zealand, 3,000 kilometers, totally other world. Just how does doing these sort of self-supported, unsupported FKTs, for want of a better word, just going out and having an adventure, how does that fit into your whole, if you like, lifetime running journey? And does it complement the races? Does it get in the way of races? Just tell us about that whole aspect.
Yeah, I've been racing for a long time now, and like I said, I've done a lot of the big races that I really wanted to do, and maybe I went back to UTMB too many times or something. I tend to get obsessed about particular races, and maybe I'd gone back there a few too many times. I didn't feel like the hard work was worth the reward of some of these races eventually. I think So we had the lockdown situation, obviously, which we'll all remember in the past, and racing was off. So it probably happened at the right time for me, or I don't know, but it forced everybody to step away from racing for a while. So I thought more about, well, what is it I really want to do with my running? So I had, out of the first lockdown, I think I'd run the East and West Highland Way together, just on my own, just for something to do. I wanted to go and do something that I quite enjoyed. And that led on to running the end-to-end trail, so right across the UK from south to north. And it was just an incredible experience. Being able to travel across a country and see all the changes and the landscapes and everything else, and to have that single focus for a long period. Like end-to-end trail was about, I think it was about 29 days or something, but you wake up every day and your whole focus for the day is to keep moving forward and keep ticking off those miles. And it's quite a unique position to be in. So when I was out in New Zealand, we were finishing up in New Zealand, and Alice had said to me, I think we should try and do, or give you this opportunity to go and do the Te Araroa. And yeah, I kind of jumped at it. We debated it for a while. It's a big undertaking. Obviously, I run a coaching business and stuff as well, and it's been hard enough to run that from New Zealand, never mind, you know, be out there for 50 days, like with very little communication, and be able to just keep on moving all the time. I just get a lot from it. I get a lot of a big sense of adventure. I get probably a bigger sense of accomplishment. Like I've won some races in the past that I finished the race and it's what I really wanted. I think it's what I really want, and I'll feel happy if I get to the end and I win this race and whatever, and I get to the end and I don't really feel anything when I get to the end. Whereas I feel quite a lot when I have to force myself to get up the next day and go back out again, and to go back out again and push through another night section. The New Zealand one was tougher than I probably gave it credit for. There was quite a few overnights and huts and overnights that I wasn't prepared for, and that I had no kit with me, I had no sleeping bag or anything. So I ended up in a hut with nothing but my shorts and my t-shirt and my pack and a couple of soft flasks. So yeah, it was really, really difficult. But I think I enjoyed it. I still haven't worked it out yet, but yeah, I really drawn to some of these experiences.
Yeah. So for anyone who's never done a big adventure like that, it's very easy to get obsessed with racing, and as you say, doing the same races year after year. But many of us have been running more years than we like to remember. Just taking time out to have a little adventure one year without the pressure of getting ready for a race can be very rewarding. And I think Paul will probably admit you've learned an awful lot about yourself as well doing these solo
Absolutely.
expeditions,
Yeah.
right? What you can and can't do. Okay, so that's, I hope in those last 20 or so minutes, those who haven't met Paul before now get a better grasp of Paul the person and Paul the runner. John and Helen, are there any questions come in specifically? Has anyone got a question just over that little section of Paul's sort of running career? Or has everyone just been spelled out?
Yeah, there is, Adrian, actually. Joran's asking if there are any races still on Paul's bucket list.
Yeah, there are one or two races I definitely want to do. I haven't given up on racing, and it's probably easy to think that I haven't raced since Barclay a couple of years ago, or maybe more than that. But yeah, there's one or two races I like to do. There's also one or two big trails that I'm really keen to do as well. So it's going to take a bit of planning and a bit of time to get those organised. But yeah, there's definitely more to come yet from my running career, I hope.
This might be part of what you're going to talk about later, Paul, but Al is asking what your mental strategies that you use towards the end of a race when energy levels are low and your legs are sore.
Yeah, I'll probably talk a bit about that later, but like, see for any race you do, like any race I can remember, whether it's 50k, 50 miles, or it was coming to day 20 in the Te Araroa trail. It's like the last few kilometers can be really, really difficult. You know, it just seems to take a lifetime. You get 5k and you think, 5k, I mean, I should really be doing this 5k in 25 minutes or whatever. I've been out all day, but it can just feel a bit of a drag. So as far as mental strategies go, you know, it's a lot about identifying your why and why you want to be there and what you're going to get out of it when you finish, and being intrinsically motivated, I think, is the thing. And sometimes just from my coaching experience in the past, there's people who want to do races because they think they're the races they should be doing rather than the races that they really care about. And I think that makes a big difference. See, when things start to get tough and they're like, why did I think this was a good idea? I don't even like this race. I don't even like mountains, but I'm doing UTMB. You're like, well, maybe you should have done something that you really do care about. And I try and encourage all my athletes to be passionate about it. I've got an athlete, for example, who doesn't race anymore really, but he did a big adventure on Saturday, which I crewed for him. And he's been lucky enough that he's identified, well, what's really important to me as part of my running, and what's important to him is going and having adventures and doing the planning and doing the work and doing the recce's. So I think it's important that people understand why, their own why for doing a race or an event, and that makes all the difference.
And one more question, Adrian, and then you can have your break if that's what you want to do. Yop is asking, what words of wisdom do you have for first timers in the West Highland Way?
First timers, I talked about earlier. I don't know if you've done 100 miles before or not, but it's a really unique and special time, I think. I wish I could go back and do the West Highland Way for the first time again. I really do, just because you just don't know how you're going to feel. You don't know what's going to happen. You're not quite sure how you're going to feel when you get to Glencoe and you see those mountains in front of you and you've still got that to do. And then coming out of Kinlochleven, you've got that steep climb, and then all of a sudden you're in this valley that just with this endless trail. So I would go into it as much as you can. It sounds a bit hippie or something, but just go in with like a really open heart to, like, I'm going to take on whatever this trail delivers to me. I'm going to take on as a great experience and just try and enjoy it. Try and feed off the energy around you. It's like if you're fortunate to be running with people, then if you feel like it, have some conversation, have some chat. There's loads of good support out on the trail. So like, I can't remember what I went to see recently. I went to see a race recently, and I was shouting on people, and oh, it was a fling, I think, shouting on people, and encouraging them and stuff. And actually, I felt sometimes like saying to people, like, try and feed off that energy. You know, some people are very miserable, or they're just in a pain cave. I get it, but I always remember when I was running, see if I saw somebody on a trail who said, "Oh, well done, Paul," or "good for you," or whatever. I used that energy and I put a smile on my face and I said, "Thank you." So like, try and use the people around you. There's people there who really want to see you get to the end. So remember that nobody's against you. Everybody wants everybody who starts the West Highland Way to get to the end, and it's not going to happen. But that's what everybody's out to do, is to give you a good experience and a good day. So I would be excited about it and go in with an open heart.
Great words of wisdom, Paul. Thank you. So I just have one little item of housekeeping before we move on to Richard to talk about Ultra, is that most of you who are running should have got an email to say that we now have the race merchandise on the race shop. I did put a little post on the Facebook site, and I know people have been asking about sizing, I think, and I will reply to that probably later on this evening. But if you haven't got your email, look in your spam, or anyone who's on the call who's not doing the race wants to look at the merchandise, go onto the West Highland Way Race website and find the shop page, and you can browse and order away at your leisure. Thank you. If you are ordering merchandise, you can do it two ways. You can have it posted out if you let us know in the next week, or you can opt to have it collected at the registration, in which case it won't cost you anything. We'll just parcel it all up, bring it to registration. You can pick it up when you pick up your number, etc. Okay. Right. Well, I'm very delighted. We've got one of our sponsors, Richard from Ultra, here tonight. And Ultra have been supporting not only our race, but several ultra races, both in the UK and throughout the planet, as their own little journey as a brand takes wings and flies, shall we say. Yeah. So Richard is just going to talk for a few minutes about the brand, probably in two parts. Richard, if you just want to say, how did Ultra sort of start? And that's a story in itself, and sort of how you got involved in it, etc. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, that's for sure. I mean, the brand started way back in 2009 originally, and Brian Beckstead, one of our co-founders, and Golden Harper used to work in a running store in Utah, over in America, and initially they used to lace the shoes lengthways at the bottom of the shoe in the running store they used to be at. In fact, if I just share my screen, I've got a little just a little slide for you to just sort of see. So we all see that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So initially they used to lace the shoes lengthways. So rather than crisscrossing the shoe on the forefoot, we used to lace it lengthways, and it'd splay the toes out. If you look in the background of the pitch there, you can see Brian's first pair of lone peaks. He's laced the shoe, the laces upwards rather than crisscrossing, and that ultimately allowed the toes to splay out in its natural fit. And the idea kind of became a big thing, and everyone who was coming into the running store was walking out with the laces like that. And you go to a local road race, everyone's got the laces lengthways as opposed to crisscross. And from that, they started to get scheming to get the brands to, make the shoe that they wanted. And, they had numerous meetings with the likes of Brooks, New Balance, Saucony, to name a few. And no one really wanted to take this on. One or two of them liked the idea, but no one really wanted to take this idea on. So they took the incentive themselves from doing that. And Brian ultimately ran Wasatch 100 around 3 hours faster when he made the very first pair of lone peaks there. You can see in the background, after pretty much ripping his feet off and duct taping them together and then getting ripped off again. He ran 3 hours faster with that foot-shaped toe box, which we designed. And from that, Ultra was born with a USP of the foot-shaped toe box. And the shoe you see behind there, Brian remortgaged his dad's house to make one pair of shoes within the Lone Peak. And that shoe now for us in the States is the top-selling trail shoe. Outsells the Hoka Speedgo. So it's incredibly popular. It's our flagship shoe. Now from that, we've always traditionally done zero drop shoes. So essentially, Golden pretty much put his shoes in the toaster oven, and he came up with the idea of zero drop. And the idea was that the heel was hacked off and then re-glued back on, so you had the same amount of cushioning in the front of the shoe as you had at the back of the shoe. And back then, when this whole idea was kind of forming, particularly when I was just starting in running retail at the time, back in 2010, there was a big emphasis on barefoot minimalist running form, running more mid to forefoot, running efficiency. This had taken off in America, and we kind of came in at that point with a little bit more to offer because we had what was zero drop. We had the foot shaped toe backs, so that natural fit around the front of the shoe to splay the toes out, to have them more naturally fitted, to work with the foot and the body further up. And what the key thing we had was we had some cushioning inside the shoe. So at the time, Brian actually spoke about this on a podcast recently. Everyone was going into sort of barefoot minimalist shoes and just breaking down because they were running too much of them straight away. They're running on concrete and tarmac. They're going from 10, 40 mil drop shoes, because that's kind of what it was back then, into these barefoot minimalist shoes. And there was a lot of people, getting injured. So we kind of came in and went, well, we added a bit of cushioning into that shoe. And just having that bit of cushioning, even today when I'm at the Marathon Expos and national running shows, get a lot of people who are in the barefoot shoes wanting to come into the brand because they just want that bit of cushioning. And ultimately that gave us something as another talking point as well, is that we had the zero drop. Now obviously, as this has kind of gone on, the brand has evolved, the industry has changed. It's not what it was 10 or 12 years ago. Shoes are completely changed. And that has ultimately given us a platform to start and evolve as a brand going forward. Now, normally at this point, I would have probably a lot of people who are familiar with Ultra have all seen the X-ray image of a foot in an Ultra shoe, and then there's a foot in your traditional shoe. And you can clearly see the benefits of having that foot-shaped toe box to a standard fitted toe box around the front. So the initial sort of idea is, if you look at the diagrams we have here on the left, you've got your traditional shoe fit. and then in your right, you've got the Ultra shoe fit. So if you look at the end of the, on the right-hand side where the big toe would be, we keep the big toe straight. That's the longest part of the shoe is the big toe. The big toe does a lot of work when we run. First of all, it's a stabilizing mechanism for when we're running. It supports the majority of the body further up. We put all our weight through our big toe. Anyone who's broke the big toe or dropped something on the big toe and bruised it, or clicked it on the side of the chair once they walked into the living room and it's bruised, and you're walking around after and you're limping, it's because you put all your weight through that part of your body. We need the big toe to allow it to pronate slightly. So we let that shock out ever so slightly when we roll in. We need to pronate naturally. So again, the big toe works on that basis. So we want to keep it straight. We don't want to be, pointing it inwards already and creating or encouraging longer term damage. We see people who have things like bunions, neuroma damage, that sort of thing, from tightly fitted shoes, whether it be running or every day. So we need to keep that big toe straight. It's a very important part. And then you look at the front of the shoe around the rest of it. We can't keep the rest of the toes splayed out more naturally. That allows more stability further up the body. Your feet support your body further up. Simple as that. Your toes do a lot of work in that as well. More surface area. So again, you've got more support for the body further up. But overall, it's comfier. You're avoiding things like your blisters at the end of your toes, which I'm sure, even though you might be running 100 miles, and I know Brian came back and had no blisters whatsoever with his. I know sometimes you put your body through quite a bit. It's unavoidable, but it helps to kind of avoid those messy situations. And we've used that USP of the foot shaped toe box, and it's a big part of who we are. We've evolved it. We have 3 different toe box fits now. We don't have the same toe box fit for all the models, and ultimately that allows us to have, as a brand, a very, very high retention rate globally and here in the UK. Once people are in it, they don't go out of it, and it's allowing us to really grow quick as a brand. And there's a big emphasis now on having a comfier, roomier fit around the front of the shoe. We see everyday footwear changing as well. We see people in these round the shape shoes like Birkenstocks, Crocs, which I'm sure some of you are on this now will probably be wearing after the event because you want to wear something comfy. We see it in the marathons as well. And ultimately, there's now an option for you here in the running shoes, as we feel we can provide. And following on from that, we still do the zero drop shoes in a vast array of what we call stack heights. So not every zero drop shoe is the same. Some are quite chunky, have a lot of cushion underneath. Others are still very ultra-S, where we have a very low stack. What we have done is we've added a 4mm drop into the shoe now. We have our 3 new models in the Experience family. We've got 2 on the road, a neutral and a support shoe. And for your trail enthusiasts, we now have a trail shoe in there as well. And ultimately, what this has allowed us to do is to keep that USP of the toe box, but reach out to a wider market to invite them into the brand and experience that foot shaped toe box as well. Now, when we started, everything was at sort of 10 to 14 mil in terms of the offset. Roughly now, most shoes are kind of 6 to 7 mil. So, having a 4mm drop in there is very sort of minimal to what you would compare to previously, where it would be a big difference. All the brands have kind of brought that offset down in the shoe. There's very few left at 12mm now. Majority of them are at 8, and then you have some sort of like around about the 6s and 7s. And we've actually found that more people have gone into the brand for that reason. And it's not to say that we don't believe in the whole zero drop thing. Brian Beck said the founder has always wanted to do this. It's just finding the right time and the right moment as a brand to do that. So we now offer that for people who maybe don't want the zero drop range, or kind of don't get on with it. We get that, and we have the option for you to try now going forward, which is important. And then this is just sort of like an overview of the different toe box fits we have. We have original, and that's in our widest fit. So that's in anything that's Olympus or Lone Peak family for those people more familiar. And then as we start going down to the standard and the slim fit size, you can see around the midfoot, we come a little bit thinner. And we also start to taper in around the outside of the little toe, in particular, from the standard down to the slim. So your standard fit ones in the majority of the shoes you can see below there. The slim fit ones obviously in the racing shoes, and we have the likes of the Rivera and Outroad. They've been designed for a more narrow foot, someone who's a bit more high volume. The original concept is good and it works, but I can tell you from experience, fitting the shoe in retail, like it doesn't fit everyone's foot. Everyone's foot shape's different. If you've got a very sort of high volume foot, high arch, you're not taking up that space around the shoe, so the fit then becomes more difficult, and ultimately you're then missing out on sharing something to someone to try on. So this will look familiar to you, Adrian, from the test event that we did back in end of January, was it now?
January was.
Yeah, it's gone really quick. So yeah, we've obviously got the Timp 5 here. This is our newest trail shoe, bar the 4mm drop one that we launched this year. In terms of, it's the biggest one really for the trail this year. The Timp is basically our sort of, not max cushion, but cushion everyday trail shoe. Our equivalent to, I would say, if you look at the tech sheet there, the Spiga, the Brooks Calderas of the world. Now the Timp 4 previously didn't have the Vibram Mega Grip outsole, which if you see the bottom picture on the slide there, you can see how we've kind of mapped it out with the tendons of the foot, and it's on a slight, it's difficult to sort of see there, it's on a slight angle, so it actually bites in nicely onto the ground. Now we gave this out at the West Highland Way demo event. I got 20 pairs on my sheet, I think it was, that we tried. So that was double from the previous year when we had the Lone Peak, so that was good uptake. We had 5 people take it out for just over 30 miles on the recce run, and we had positive feedback from the shoe. The Vibram grip does not slip on wet rock; it's just sticks. We took it up Ben Lurman the next day, me and Connor, and yeah, everyone's kind of like sliding on the way down in the bad weather, and we're just sort of like walking down like nothing's going on. But yeah, particularly that part of the recce run, I think it was a brilliant shoe to test. I would say for most people. So yeah, we've added Vibram onto that shoe. We've reduced the price of the shoe by £5 as well, so that's something else we've done. And it's got Ego Max. That's our more plush cushioning that we use in the shoe. And 29mm stack of cushioning. So the best way is to describe it is it's very similar to a Hoka Speed. It's our Hoka Speedgoat equivalent if you were to kind of really put it against a few of the brands. And then Lone Peak 8, our flagship shoe. We again, it's still our best-selling shoe. Our original toe box fit, a lot more ultra-esque. We have a little bit of a lower stack on this at 25mm, a slightly firmer midsole. We have a stone guard integrated into this, so you don't feel the rocks prodding underneath the foot. So brilliant for certain sections of the West Highland Way. I've taken this previous models before on from Glencoe Ski Centre heading out from there. A bit more nimble, so if you're wanting that wider toe box fit, we had a few people who preferred this to the Timp, which is completely understandable. It's got the wider toe box. It's much more comfier as well. You'll notice on the back of the shoe here, just below where the tag is, so the pulling tag is at the back. We actually put Velcro on there for gaiters. So anyone who wants to buy gaiter or ultra ones, the Velcro strap on the back, and you can tie them around to the front of the shoe as well. For men, we do this in wide fit. We actually do this in 2E for men as well. So you get that a little bit wider on the width at the front. But yeah, definitely one for the ultra fan. And anyone who wants to try the brand, I would highly recommend this. It's a unique shoe. It was my first ultra shoe that I tried. And a bit of a preview, because this hasn't launched yet, but it's coming out next month. Now we have the Olympus 5 currently, but we've got the Olympus 6 coming out. There'll be a lot of people who use this shoe. We were at UTS Snowdonia a few weeks ago. Everyone who was wearing ultra pretty much was in the Olympus 5, and the 6 is no different really, because it's our max cushion shoe. It's 33mm stack of cushioning. So even though it's not got a
think Richard's got a wee issue, Adrian. He seems to have frozen.
His screen is locked. Yes. Are you there, Richard? No. Well, maybe we'll come back to that in a minute. In true broadcasting fashion, I'll just be the link man here. Richard hopefully will get back to us in a minute, but in the meantime, I think he almost got towards the end of his presentation. Having been in running retail for over 30 years, at this point in my life, all ultra runners are geeky about their shoes. They spend hours thinking about the right shoe. Yeah. So if you haven't tried ultra, I would just say next time you're looking at replacing your trail shoes, do give them a little look and just see how they compare with what you're wearing at the moment. Yeah. Okay, moving right along. Welcome back, Paul. Paul, you can see that they're Pylon Live or Live Learning. You have your own coaching business. Just briefly explain how you got into coaching, who you coach. Have you got any people doing the West Highland Way you've been helping over the last few months? And you think you're on mute, Paul? Yes.
Oh, yeah, that's me. Sorry, everyone. Amateur, the old Zoom, basic mistakes. Yes, I have a few athletes, or we have a few athletes running. Pylon used to just be me way back. Started in 2014, so we're 10 years old this year. 10 years of coaching. It's been good. We're a proper team now. There's about 7 coaches really, and we've coached a whole bunch of athletes from across the world, from people who are mid-pack, back of the pack, or chasing for a GB vest in races from, I don't know, from 24-hour track races, world champs, to Barclay marathons, to the Highland Fling, to all sorts of races and wonderful events that people have been doing. So yeah, it's been good. I never had a big plan when I started out with Pylon. It was really just a way for me to kind of commit my life to running and ultra running, was to find a way to fund my running firstly, and also to give something back. And like I'd said at the start, I was a bit of a geek for the first 5 years. I just wanted to read every book I could about ultra running. Like, people who are just new to the sport, like, there's loads of information, there's loads of good stuff you can get. You can watch videos and YouTube and all that stuff. When I first started, there wasn't all that much good information about it, and a lot of it was passed down that you must do these massive back-to-back runs, and you must, if you don't do that 5 times before your big 100-mile race, you're never going to finish and your legs are going to fall off. If you don't do 50 miles followed by 40 miles the next day, which things have changed. So I've been lucky with Pylon. It's a bit of a community now. It wasn't by design, but we've got some really good people who have been with us for quite a long time now. And really now it's kind of about giving back and growing and helping people to see beyond their own limitations sometimes. And I think that's quite easy for us to do, to say, well, that's the most I could expect to ever do is run 50 miles, or I would never be able to run under 20 hours on the West Highland Way Race. And we're trying to change people's perceptions a wee bit and push them on a wee bit to say, well, if you thought of it a different way and we tackle things in a different way, and you change some things in your lifestyle, and you've got your family involved in your running, and it becomes an important part of your life, then this is what you can achieve, and you'd be surprised. So yeah, it's been an interesting 10 years, and we're going to do some celebrations this year, hopefully.
So it seems like your coaching philosophy is not just sort of, here's a schedule, get on with it. You're giving other background support and just looking at more like a holistic view of where
yeah. It's kind of like I talked about with the racing, Adrian, early on. You know, at first you want to be on that podium, and you think that's going to give you the satisfaction and everything that you desire. And actually, yes, it's good to see our athletes get onto a podium, but it's also good. Like, we've done a few of our Pylon Experience events where it's a kind of weekend residential thing, and we spend time and have conversations. But see, when you start to see people changing the lifestyle and not necessarily getting on a podium, that's the stuff that's really rewarding, I think, because, you know, they make better decisions about the food that they eat. They make better decisions about how they spend their time, and spending time with their families and being outdoors more. And that's really, really rewarding. And it's been a big part of what we've been involved in the past 10 years.
That's great. Yeah. So if you want more, to find out more about Pylon coaching, give your website a plug, Paul. Where should they look?
Pylonultra.com or on social media, Pylon Ultra. You can always contact us there. We're always up for a chat or anything. And there's never we're not out to push our coaching services, to be honest. We're just there in the background and we're doing our thing, and we're proud of what we do.
Just one thing is, I work with several runners, as you know. The people sometimes come to you with a fixed concept of what they want to do, and then within the course of time, you can turn that right on its head and say, well, actually, you're no good at that. Do this instead.
I think we try to. I think most people come in with a set expectation, because to be fair to people, they're making an investment, right? So they don't know for sure what the relationship's going to be like and what they're going to get out of it. So they're coming in with, if I spend X amount of money per month on my coach, this is what I expect to receive at the end of it when I go and do this race. But actually, it's similar with a lot of athletes. You have that period where you need to find a good place to work together and understand each other and understand what really is the motivation behind what they're doing. And once you get there, and sometimes that can take a month, sometimes that can take 3 or 4 months, or even longer with some athletes, but you usually get to the point where you've got a good understanding, and then you can have conversations about, well, I'm not sure you should be doing that race because I think you're really, really passionate about the times that you go and spend in the mountains, or you're really passionate about, pushing yourself for 24 hours around the track. That's the kind of stuff you should be focused on. So we're trying to facilitate and encourage rather than dictate what people should be doing.
Great. Okay, so looking ahead to D-Day for most people in 11 days' time. Talk us through what you would be doing in the last 11 days before the West Highland Way in terms of training, what you do train, the things you're dropping and dropping out. How does the next sort of 10 days look for you when you're building up to the race?
Yeah, I've done a couple of slides, which I'll skip through some of them because we've probably covered some of them already, but if that's useful for people, hopefully. Yeah, as you said, 11 days to go, and I hope everybody's doing okay. It's the most special 100-miler in the country, without a doubt. I know it's 96 miles, but we just call it 100-miler anyway. It really is a special race, and I hope you're feeling excited and probably quite a bit nervous at the moment as well. You know who I am already. I think I've coached 4 different winners of the West Highland Way Race, so I know it fairly well overall. I'll skip through that. So I thought it might be useful to give you some kind of useful advice that you can take away, or you can think about it later on, and either it might be useful for this race or it might be useful your overall running career, I think. So it kind of works with any race you go on to do, but I think the first thing is getting ready for the race. Like when you sign up for the race, and when you signed up, was it November or something, Adrian? Is that when people sign up? I can't remember. Or is that when they find out? It's usually the point that people are really excited about the race, and you throw yourself straight into training. And as you know, motivation doesn't always last that long unless you're really clear about your purpose, right? So the training itself is one part. The other part is you should be really clear about what your goals are, and you should be clear on what you would consider to be a good outcome from this race. And then try to understand some of the things that might hold you back when you're trying to achieve these goals, right? So I could spend a whole day just talking about goal setting, which obviously we don't have the time. So in short, if you don't have any goals at all, you've no way of taking any really satisfaction from doing the event in the first place, or you don't have very much to measure anything against. So you won't do anything with any kind of purpose, and your training might have been less productive than you intended when you first signed up for the race. So you run the risk of not putting your best self out there. So your goals, I don't think your goals have to be hugely lofty, right? Goal setting is not just for the people that are racing to get on a podium. Everyone should have a goal when they go into this race. And you have to know what it is you're trying to achieve in order to be much more effective at working towards that goal and that achievement. So your goals, like I said, could be as simple as, I want to finish the race in Fort William and I really want to enjoy the whole experience. That's a valid goal, and that's a good goal for somebody to have. It could be something like, I want to take on the challenge of running the biggest distance I've ever run in my life, or the longest event I've ever done. And that can be a good goal for you as well. And then you can be creative about it. It might be like, a smaller goal might be I want to get to Benglass feeling like I haven't started really working yet. I don't feel any pain, or I want to reach Kinloch Leaving before it gets dark, or more direct and straightforward, which is what some of us have been in the past, that I'm going to race hard and I'm going to finish on that podium no matter what. So they're all valid goals, and everybody should have a goal, whether you're thinking I'm going to be over 30 hours or you're thinking I'm going to be 14 hours. You should have some kind of clear goal that you can measure. And I won't go too much in this. I hope it isn't too geeky or something, but just to simplify things a little bit, I broadly categorize these into 3 types of goals, right? So the first category of goal might be, I want to complete. I just want to finish the event. I want to get to the end and I want to stay comfortable with the cutoff times. The second type of goal would be that kind of racing or competing goal. So I want to put myself up against other people and I want to hit a specific time or something, or I want to beat my friend's time from last year or 2 years ago when he did the race. And also, I think across both of those, there are some learning goals that can be really useful as well. I think we need to remember when we choose to do something as a hobby or something that we're really passionate about, like running and ultra running, it also provides a wider opportunity for learning about who we are as humans and our place in this world, right? So they might be like, this is an opportunity for me to practice and improve my ability to race, or to understand how I'm going to react when I'm put into these adverse circumstances. Or it might just be I want to really gauge my appetite or my capacity to take on these big physical, mental challenges. And I want to find out if I want to do more of these types of events, or if I prefer other type of race formats. These are all useful things to know in the long term ultimately for your own happiness. And the learning can be sometimes just be as simple as if I'm committed enough to see things through when things get really difficult in this race. So I think I touched on it earlier, and I've probably covered it already, but I think you should take some time now. You've still got time now if you haven't done it already, to think about your why for this race, right? Most of us roughly know why we do these things, right? We want to do well. We want to get a sense of achievement. It could be things like, I think I could be a really good runner. If I do this race, that will prove to myself that I can be a good runner. Or I've always been told I'm no good at sport, and this is an opportunity for me to show people that I really can set myself a target and I can be athletic and I can be good at sport. Or it might just be I really like pushing myself. But you have to be really clear on your why if you want a really strong reason to finish the race when it starts to get tough. So some simple examples, I think, that probably a lot of people can identify with is like, I want to prove to myself that I can succeed. I maybe want to make my kids proud, my husband proud, my wife proud, whatever it is. I want to show that I can see it through when people maybe doubted me in the past. And I want to have my day. I want to have my celebration for all those sacrifices that I made throughout this whole period of training that I put in for this race, and my family made sacrifices too. So I want this celebration. I want this day to come, and I want to do well and finish. Or it might just be as straightforward as, I really want to collect that goblet on Sunday with pride. You know, I want to know that I really earned that goblet when I walk up there in front of everybody else who took part in the race, and it's quite a special moment. So I'll quickly go through this. I'm sorry if it's taking too long, Adrian. This is something that feels quite obvious to me, really, but it's one that athletes I see miss quite a lot, right? So we have a tendency, particularly when you sign up for a race, that I want to work on everything, right? I want to work as hard as I can on everything to get ready for this race. So I want to run a 16-minute park run. I want to be able to run an 18-hour 100-miler, and I want to run up mountains like I'm a goat or something, right? So they're all quite different, and it's fine to aim big. But if you're going to be successful at any event, it's important to take the time to identify the aspects that are really mostly going to affect your result and your overall performance on the day. So with just a few weeks to go, obviously 11 days, you should have an awareness of the things that might be a limiter to you going into the race, right? So maybe you know already, I'm going to be really slow on the hills, or I'll struggle through the night. I don't like running through the night, or I'm not good at being smart about my pacing. If you know those things already and you're aware of what your own limiters are in that sense, you can better plan your race out, and you can make better decisions through the race as well. So, for example, if you were starting your training all over again, right, and say say you wanted to run, I don't know, UTMB as an example, right? You would want to work on the performance limiter that's specific to that race, right? So that might be, I need to be able to handle the physical impact of a race with a lot of ascent and a lot of descent, right? If you want to win a 5K race, having this big, massive endurance base is probably unlikely to help you win that race because it's all about speed. So you probably want to work on your leg turnover speed as an example. So at this stage, you should have a good idea of what these performance limiters might be for you if you're going to complete 96 miles of the West Highland Way, right? So things you would look at would be speed, endurance, your mental strength, preparedness and planning. So that's all the stuff that you'll do around your crew and stuff like that as well, about making good decisions. And then all the technical stuff about environmental conditions and heat and cold and technical terrain and all those kind of things. So you probably can't read that on there. I can read it, the screen's quite big, but I can send it on if anybody wants it anyway. But these are just some things to think about, right? So it depends what your overall goal is. If your goal is just to finish versus I want to really race this, you might make slightly different decisions about what's important to you. So speed is clearly going to be important if you want to be on the podium or in the top 10 of this race, right? You'll need to have the capacity to run at a high average speed, and that's going to be one of your main limiters. But if you're looking to complete the race and you can comfortably run 10K in, let's say, an hour or something, then the speed itself isn't going to be so critical for you, right? I think you could do 18-minute miles, I think, and you could stop a couple of times, you could still finish the race. So that's maybe less important to you and less of a limiter for you. The endurance side of things, if you're coming to Mulgai to race, then you should at least have done a decent ultra time in like a 50K race or a 100K type race. So you'll already have built a lot of endurance in your training already. If the distance is new to you, and maybe you've only run 50 miles and this is going to be your big step up, then the endurance is likely to be one of your biggest limiters, and it's something you should have a think about now. The mental strength and stamina, again, this is where your why is going to come into it. You need to have a really strong reason for being there. And that's going to make the difference when things start to get really tough in the race, which is going to happen regardless of if you're at the back of the race or the front. Decision making, also very important. We've all seen, or maybe even been there, the person who gets really excited at the start and they think they're going to have this markedly better day than they've ever had in training, and they go out too hard and maybe they blow up by Balmaha or Riverdene, and that's a very, very difficult day if you've done that. So you need to be able to make good, smart decisions throughout the race. And then finally, obviously, there's all the kind of technical, environmental stuff that I talked about. But things you can consider now that can help you when you start to write your plan is how well can you take on calories, how you're going to deal with stomach problems. Are you good on rough terrain, or do you need to take extra care on the descent from the Devil's Staircase, for example? What will you do if it's hot? How will you deal with apocalyptic conditions, which could happen on the West Highland Way Race? So I've really gone through that quickly. If anybody, I'm happy to do a session after the race for anybody that maybe wants to do a session that's a bit more detailed and a bit slower. I'm happy to do that. So I know you're probably thinking, listen, Paul, I just want some top tips for the race now. So I've collated some top tips that you maybe have or haven't heard before. I would encourage you to have a look at those performance limiters, have a note of them, have a note of the things that are likely to slow you down or stop you having a good performance. I think it's important to have a clear goal. You can keep that goal to yourself if you don't want to share it, but when you do share it, it becomes real and it becomes powerful. Adrian and I talked earlier about the race after Terry Conway won and I finished second. Even I vocalised that for the first time, that goal that I was going to break the record on the West Highland Way. I said it to my mum and dad at the time, and they thought it was mad. But for me, it was a huge step because it made it feel like, well, I've said this now. I'm going to have to go out there and do that. So, like, vocalising things like that can be useful sometimes, but I understand not everybody wants to. You have to have a plan. You have to have a plan. You have to have a plan, right? How can you can't make good decisions if you don't have something to base those decisions on, right? So if you write a plan and you get to I don't know, you get to Balmaha and you're 30 minutes ahead of your schedule, at least you can make a decision there and you have some understanding that you've maybe gone out too hard, or you can decide that, okay, I'm okay with that. It means I've got more time to take in the next section. So have a plan that's really useful. Your crew also need a plan in order for them to do their job properly. So it's really useful. And obviously, you have to be willing to ditch the plan when things go wrong. Like, I ask people to write plans as a coach, and then sometimes I've found that people stick to the plan. It might be, say, for example, I don't know, it gets to 10 o'clock in the morning on a West Highland Way and it's 20 degrees and it's predicted to be 25 degrees by 2 o'clock. You need to take that into account and you need to change your plan on the back of it. Likewise, if you have a sore leg or you have a bad tummy, then you need to be able to adapt your plan. So it's quite important that you don't stick to it, but it gives you a useful base in order for you to make good decisions throughout the race. And then I think it's important to have a think about how you're going to deal with the moments that start to go wrong, that something feels bad, or I don't feel like I'm taking on enough nutrition and my stomach feels bad. You need to have a plan, a mental plan in your head about what you're going to do there. And James and I had written an approach for that, which is quite useful. We also recorded a series on the podcast, and I'll put it on the website and I'll put a link at the end of this, and you're welcome to download it and stick it on your phone or whatever. It's just some suggestions about what you can do when things start to go wrong. The next thing I had in my head, which I maybe haven't passed on to enough athletes because somebody did it recently in a race. I think it's important when you're going into checkpoints, aid stations, whatever you call them, you know what you're going to do, right? So you might have written a plan now, you might have a plan already, or you might write it in the next week to say this is what you're going to have, this is the food you're going to have, and this is what time you expect to be there. Things can go wrong and things don't feel good when you're going into the checkpoint, right? So it's important that you try and write a mental checklist, maybe 3 things you want to achieve when you go into that checkpoint, right? The 3 things might be, I really need to change my socks. I can feel a bit of a hot spot on my foot, so I need to change my socks. I need to take on some calories because I haven't eaten for the last hour, and I need to make sure I'm going out with 3 bottles because it's quite warm. So unless you do that before you go in, the chances are you're going to get in there. There's lots of people about. It's quite exciting, and they're shoving food in your face, and you're going to end up coming out of that aid station without having done those 3 things that were really important to you that whole 1 hour section before you got into the aid station. So try and write a mental plan and have that ready. If you've got crew there and the crew are at your checkpoint, tell them, I need to go to the toilet, I need to change my socks, and I want to change my top. Tell them, and then they know what has to be done. So that's a really useful tip, and I've seen people mess that up quite a lot. I've messed it up myself as well. So have a think about that. When you're in checkpoints, efficiency beats haste. I know everybody will say, I'm not going to spend any time in checkpoints, and then they get in there and they maybe rush out too quickly, they've forgotten stuff, or they go in there and they spend way too much time. They start sitting about, they start getting cold. It's more difficult to stand up again and get back out. So I would definitely think about efficiency when you're in the aid station. It's okay to take 5, 10, 15 minutes if you absolutely need it, but I certainly wouldn't be spending loads of time in there, because even if you're taking some food and you want to eat, take some food and start walking, because when you start walking, you're taking another step closer to Fort William all the time. And you'll be amazed at how much time you can, you can cover a mile walking relatively quickly if that's what you need to do in order to get food down, rather than sitting there in the aid station for another 50 minutes. So definitely something to have a think about. When things start to get really tough, I would try to see yourself and your situation from above, right? Like, we get so caught up in how we feel and how our race is going and what everybody's going to be thinking about me. We are just at the center of it the whole time. And you can easily catastrophize about how bad it is, and oh, my feet feel terrible, and this is awful, and this is not the way it's supposed to be. I dreamt that I'd be running down towards Bridge of Orchy here and everything would feel great. And you can really get caught up in all that. See if you can take a step back and think, right, okay, I don't feel as good as I hope to feel at this point, but I'm 55 miles, 60 miles into this race, and I'm still moving forward. It's a good day, the weather's okay, and I'm going to keep on going. I'm going to keep on moving. I'm going to do 1 or 2 things that are going to make me feel slightly better when I get into that aid station, so that I can get back out the other side and I can keep on moving towards Fort William. The final one, I think I've got the final one. No, I've got a final after the final. Rocket countdowns, right? It sounds ridiculous. Rocket countdowns are really useful. So if you're walking, maybe you've been walking for 15 minutes, you feel like crap, but you want to run, I would give yourself a minute, and when you're ready to start running again, you do a countdown. You do 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go, and you start running, right? Even if it's for 2 minutes, you never break it. So once you say to yourself, once I start a countdown, I never break it. I start running when I get to the end of that countdown. I'm never going to break that. And it's a really good way to transition from doing nothing into doing something, doing some action. So starting to run again. And it's just a little technique you can use sometimes to keep yourself moving. So then my final is, I mentioned it at the start, it's important that you see yourself as an athlete, right? No matter if you're finishing the last person to finish the race, you're taking on a 96-mile race, right? You've been training hard for it. You've been working hard. You've put a lot of effort in. You've made sacrifices. See yourself as an athlete. And it's such a simple thing to do. But when you talk to yourself as an athlete, you start to believe yourself to be an athlete. And then you train and you race better. And anyone who's tackling the West Highland Way Race has permission to call themselves an athlete, right? So start doing it. It's a small thing, but think about it over the next couple of days. And then finally, enjoy the journey, right? It's like we can get really, really fixated on the outcome, and we'll worry about what people will think, and we'll worry about our crew and your friends. What will my friends think if I don't finish the race? But this is your journey, and only you can take the journey, whatever that leads. And we hope, everyone hopes it leads everyone to Fort William and to that sports hall on the Sunday to pick up your goblet. But we build these events up in our mind like they're life and death, and they're not. So please don't forget that some of the best parts of any event is getting prepared for it. It's about being around good people, and it's about trying to be your best self. However that result turns out for you, you're taking on something that's really, really bold, and you're putting yourself out there. So like a quote I'd used before is like, you can waste your life drawing lines, right? And that means sitting around every weekend, watching Netflix box sets, saying to yourself, I'm going to do that next year. I quite fancy doing that next year, right? Or you can live your life crossing those lines by being vulnerable, by being open to the chance of failure, but grabbing the opportunity to learn more about yourself. And I think it's important to remember that you're doing something that's really bold, and be proud of it, and be open to whatever lies ahead, and don't overpressure yourself either. So yeah, sorry I ran through that really quickly. Like I say, I can do a session for anybody that fancies it, maybe a month or so after the race. But I mentioned earlier about a mental approach that James and I had done. I put a version of it on that link there, which somebody can share or whatever. You can download it there if you want. It might be useful. If you've got any questions, comments after this session, then please, by all means, just get me on social media or whatever. I'll see you out there. I'll be out crewing for Alice, who's next door listening to this, I think, at the moment. And I'll be encouraging everybody that I see in the race. So try your best to smile when there's people giving you support, even when you feel like crap. And don't forget about the volunteers. Like, the race wouldn't happen without the volunteers. So be really grateful, say thanks. They're there to support you. They're there to try and make the best of your time on that trail and try and get you to Fort William. So you're not on your own. It feels like it sometimes, but you're definitely not on your own. That's all I've got to say on that.
Ready to start. Thank you, Paul. That was great. I'm thinking Richard, by the way, had a power cut. Those of you wondering where Richard is, if he's okay, he sent me a message.
Oh, no.
So, he is well. I'm thinking there will be a few questions in the chat box now.
There's actually a couple. The first one is, where does the name Pylan come from, Paul?
Yeah, I've been asked that a few times. Way back, I used to do a load of music production stuff. I still do some bits and pieces. Kind of came from that, but it started as a Twitter handle. I had actually come out of a difficult relationship at that point, and a friend said, "Oh, why don't you sign up for Twitter?" It was really early on Twitter, probably the first year it was out, and that was the name I'd used, and it kind of came from there. So then I started coaching some athletes, and we did some branding work and talked about what we should be call us. Should we call us ultra fast coaching or something? And people had started saying Team Pylon already, and I'm part of Pylon, so it kind of happened organically, really, and it felt right to keep it as it was. So yeah, that's the long and short of it.
You've kind of covered this a wee bit, but maybe a couple of points. Simon's asking if you can remember any specific strategies for your nutrition and hydration, and did they go to plan?
Yeah, a useful one for me, I think, you need to think about the 1 a.m. start time, right? And it's quite disruptive because you've missed sleep and you haven't slept so well on the Friday, even though you took the day off work and you think, I'm going to sleep during the day. You don't sleep, you lie in your bed and look at the ceiling. That's what most of us do. So that can be quite disruptive. So what I tried to do was, I would fix a time. So I would say if when I get to Riverdenning, it might be much earlier for some people, whatever. I would say I'm going to have breakfast. So I'm going to try and have breakfast at like 6 o'clock in the morning or 7 o'clock in the morning. I would have something that felt like breakfast. I'd be fueling before that on the usual kind of race fuel, whatever it is you take, but I would have something solid then at breakfast time. So I would have some muesli or some porridge or some Weetabix or whatever it was, and I'd do that really quickly, get some solid food into me. And then I would also try and have a lunchtime as well. So that might be at Octortire Farm or whatever. I would have a lunchtime, and I'd have maybe a sandwich then or some potatoes or whatever it was. I can't remember at the time, which I found really useful. And then I would try and, well, it's probably Fort William for dinner time anyway. But like try and like set out some meals, particularly if you're going to be out for like a second night. It's quite a useful thing to do. I think it's important. Like it takes a wee bit more time to take that food on board, but I've always found that personally your stomach's much better when you've taken on some solid food rather than just gels or whatever. It's quite a long time to be out there just on that kind of fuel.
Thank you. And Neil asks if you've got any advice you can give for the support crew.
Support crew, yes. I think support crews, if you can, like if you can and you haven't done it already, it's like get your crew together with the person who's racing, have a beer if you can in the next few days, and get a plan down in front and talk your crew right through, right? Your crew are giving up time, loads of time and effort to come out and help you, right? So you need to give them the information that they need in order to do the best job for you. So it's really important that you pay attention and you ask loads of questions and do it now. Don't do it on the day when they're in Octortire Farm and they're feeling like crap and you're saying, oh, I don't know, do you like pot noodles or do you want it this way? All that, like do all that work up front if you can. And remember your crew might not be runners or whatever, so they might not know the things that you would expect them to know. So you need to be quite clear on what you're asking them to do. And I think it's okay. Like I think most crews are happier when they've been given some clear instructions of this is what I want. And things like I think it's important to have conversations about most people don't do it right. So crews can often be family members, might be your husband or it might be your wife or sister, whatever. It was early on, it was my mum and dad and stuff like that. And it wasn't, they're great. They were great. My dad's not here anymore, but and my mum was amazing, all that. But like sometimes they would have a conversation about what you're going to do when you feel like pulling out. For example, I feel like dropping. I don't want to do this race anymore. Because like anytime my mum saw me suffering, she'd say, oh, why don't you stop now, Paul? This is just like, it's just not happening today and you're not feeling good and I don't want to see you upset kind of thing. Just pull out. It's like, oh, you look like your leg is really sore, just stop. And sympathy isn't always good for an ultra runner. I'm not saying ignore your athlete and just say everything's fine when it's not. If their leg's hanging off and they have to stop, then that's fine. It's no problem. But sometimes you just need to let a runner vent a little bit and moan about how bad it was, and you just say, okay, right, what we're going to do now is we're going to sit down for a couple of minutes. I'm going to get you some food. I'm going to change those socks, and then we're going to get back on your feet, and we're going to see how it feels in the next. Don't make it an easier out for your athlete is what I'm trying to say, and have those conversations first of all. I mean, there might be a point that like you have to agree that you're not going to push them back out again, or you need to stop them going back out because they're just not in shape to go and do it. So have some of those conversations up front, and yeah, things might go a bit more smoothly.
Have you got time for one more, Adrian?
Yes, I'd just like to add on to that. Several athletes I've worked over the years have those conversations, and the bottom line often comes down to you're feeling crap now, you're going to feel even worse on Monday morning, realizing you could have finished this darn thing.
Yeah, yeah. And there's definite ups and downs in races. It's like I've been myself. I've been feeling like I was close to death at points, like thinking this is just the worst thing I've ever done in my life. And then I don't know, within an hour and a half, I'm like, oh, I should feel okay, and I'm moving pretty well here, and I'm getting faster than I was. So you're never totally down and out unless there's like a major physical injury. You're never down and out. So you're going to have some troughs, but you can also be back on a crest again, if you give yourself an opportunity.
We definitely have time for one more, Helen. Here, carry on.
Okay, it's just how do you manage mentally with the phantom injuries and niggles leading up to the race? Now, Keith Hughes has got a really good name for those, and I've completely forgotten what it was now that I've said it. John might remember. What does he call it?
I can't remember.
Remember?
Yeah,
He
no.
calls them whingeries.
Sorry,
That's
Winjuries.
it.
That's it,
Winjuries.
Winjuries.
Nice. Like it. I haven't heard that before.
Thanks, Ian.
Yeah, I think injuries are pretty common overall. Like it's useful if you've got some confidence in the training that you've done already, then from now until the race, you might feel the odd tweak or whatever, but like I wouldn't get too panicked about it if you can help it. I definitely wouldn't go overboard with trying to get it sorted. I mean, if it's really bad and you feel you have to see a physio or something, then there's some debates about whether or not you should be doing the race, of course. But I really wouldn't panic, because those little niggles will soon be replaced by proper niggles 60 miles in that you'll forget you even had a sore hamstring in the first place. But no, I'm joking. It's like you get this psychological. I think it's more psychological, to be honest, that you have these pains that are coming from nowhere. Remember, you're like, if your training's gone well, you've gone from like a peak training phase down into a taper. So naturally, your body's going to start being recovering, and it might show itself as some pains as the muscle fibers rebuild and all those things from your peak training. So try not to panic, stay calm. You'll know in the first 5 or 10 miles, things can settle down very quickly, if you give yourself a chance. But if you start to panic, then things get worse. And I think psychologically, you tighten things up in your body as well, and that's not always a good thing. So try not to panic. If it's really, really bad, then you need to have conversations about whether you should be there or not, and don't be too disappointed if you have to pull out, I suppose.
Fabulous. That's us, I think. Clock is ticking up to 9 o'clock, our allotted hour and a half. I just want to thank Paul for giving up his time and for all his gems of wisdom. I also want to give another plug for the merchandise. Check your spam box, check your mailbox. All the runners should have had a mail about merchandise, but I will put a link on the Facebook site either later tonight in the morning just to remind everybody. And we will chat, John and I will chat to Paul. We'll maybe get a link to put on the Facebook site for some of the wisdom he's had tonight, put at one of those precious slides so people can do this. Lots of hearts and thumbs up coming across the screen that I'm looking at. So I think it's generally acknowledged you're getting a virtual round of applause there. Okay. Yeah. And just remains for me to say, just behave yourselves the next 10 days. Don't do anything stupid. And we'll see you all in Norgai a week on Friday.
Whoop, whoop.
Thanks to he's not here, but we love his talk on ultra shoes. Okay. See you soon, people.
Bye.
Bye all.
Thank
Good
you.
luck, everyone. See you out there.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Paul.
No worries.